All right.
You know who the father of mass production was? Well, that was Henry Ford. I have researched the speech thoroughly and been a fan of Ford vehicles all my life. During the speech, you'll hear about his childhood, his adult life, his achievements, and death. According to Henry Ford on Wilson Bio, he was born on July 30th, 1863 in Dearborn, Michigan, on his family's farm. He was the father of a successful farmer. His father was William Ford. His mother was Mary Ford. His mother was a housewife. Growing up on the farm, he did not like chores. His father thought all his kids should do chores. He didn't agree with that. He pursued a life in machinery. His dislike for farm work kind of led to that. He thought that machines would make farm work and everyday life easier in every way. Not just farm, but everything. He received a watch when he was 12 years old, and from that point on, he started working machines. He would take it apart, put it back together. That's how his interest in machines really started, in building and taking them apart. At 17, he left the farm, moved to Detroit to pursue his dream machinery. Got a first job at Machine Car Works, a repairman, I believe is what he was. He worked many small jobs as a repairman and other odd jobs to make ends meet. Every single job he had, he would learn new things about machines. He built his knowledge on machinery and engineering. Eventually, he went back to the farm where he met a neighboring farmer's daughter named Claire O'Brien. They wed, according to Henry Ford by Sarah Ann McGill, they wed on April 1st, 1888. They had one child named Edsel Ford. That was the only child. He was born on November 6, 1893. Him and his wife and his child lived on a small parcel of land that his father gave him. It was about 40 acres, and he basically worked as a farmer. He despised it. He did it to make ends meet to support his family. Eventually, he decided to pursue his dreams as an engineer and build machines, and moved back to Detroit again. The first job he got when he moved back to Detroit was at the Detroit Edison Illuminating Company, which was the electricity provider for Detroit at the time, which was fairly new idea at the time. They just started building electricity and electrical products, and he was the engineer for them. Within a couple years, he became a chief engineer. During that time, he would make more money, had more time, which he can invest into his experiments, which would be combustible engines and cars. His sole purpose of building machines was he thought that combustible engines were the focus of the future for automobiles and machinery. He thought that those would steer away from the steam engines which were common during the day. He eventually, after making a few failed experiments and a few failed companies, built a quadricycle, which was his first car design, which was basically a small iron frame that he built with another iron worker, and had 4 bike tires and a small combustible engine, no reverse gears, 2 speeds, no brakes. And that was his first passion he really had with building his cars. He learned that. Eventually, he started Detroit Auto Company and Henry Ford Company. Both went bankrupt because of poor car designs, and they could afford their cars. It's too expensive. That's when he started to think that cars should be affordable for the common working man. Any person who had a decent wage should be able to own a car and be able to get it as they go. At that point, it was considered a luxury to have an automobile. It was a luxury item, and the common working man could never afford a car. He started Ford Motor Company, which became successful, and his goal was to, as I said, make affordable cars. He eventually went on to make the Model T in 1908. Was known as the Tin Lizzie. This was an extremely basic car. He wanted to make the cheapest car possible, so there was no options on it. It was just a car to get around that somebody could afford. He was quoted on Henry Ford on Wilson Bio that any customer can have a car painted in any color that he wants, as long as it's black. He realized that one single color would make the cheapest car, and black was the cheapest color. So he would make the cheapest car possible. They treated workers well and also doubled their wages. This added to their workforce and brought in more skilled laborers, which increased their productivity and increased the better product they had in the car. Stepped down, according to Henry Ford's story on henryfordstory.com, he stepped down as president in 1918 and left the presidency of his son. His son took over, but Henry Ford still kind of worked behind the scenes to on policies with the government and trying to make everything in the company work smoothly. At the time, he bought a majority of the stock to make the company a privately owned company. Before, there were stockholders that were not family members. So once he bought all the stock, it was a pure family-owned company, which was the largest one at the time, I believe. He was against using unions. He was anti-union for the longest time, thinking that he could treat the workers as good as he wanted to and as good as they needed without the unions. They were not needed. It was just wasting money, and he didn't agree with them. Eventually, after strikes, he signed a union contract in 1941. In 1943, his son died, and Henry had to take over the company again. At that point, he was just kind of barely there. He had a couple years before he died. So he tried to take over, tried to revamp the company because it was falling behind in productivity. There were probably bottom three of the top three car makers, which were Chrysler and Dodge, I believe. And at that point, April 7th, 1947, he went to his home in Fairland, which is his estate in Dearborn, Michigan, and that's where he died of a cerebral hemorrhage. During this speech, we talked about he had a life on the farm. He pursued his passion for machines. Married his love of his life, Claire Bryant, who was a big supporter of his. Had success with Ford Motor Company and left his company to his son, but later to die of a cerebral hemorrhage. Henry Ford was a brilliant entrepreneur, and his idea has changed the auto industry forever.
Very good.
Yeah, the last.